Catherine Blackwell, a wealthy widow with a life full of privilege, never imagined that her new marriage to the charming young Nathan Turner would lead to the ultimate betrayal. Trusting him with her heart and fortune, Catherine couldn't have known that the man she loved was plotting her brutal downfall, using their once dreamy life together as the perfect cover for a deadly scheme. Catherine Blackwell had always lived a life of privilege. A widow for over a decade, she was in her mid-50s, still strikingly beautiful with an air of elegance that came from years of experience in high society. After her husband's sudden passing, she inherited a vast fortune, a sprawling estate, and a legacy built on years of successful business ventures. Catherine was well versed in the finer things in life: private jets, exclusive galas, and the finest wines. But despite the wealth, despite the glamour, Catherine felt an emptiness inside, a hollow space that no amount of luxury could fill. She'd always been independent, never feeling the need for a man to complete her life. But as the years passed, she noticed the loneliness that crept in when the crowds faded, when the grand events ended, and when the spotlight turned away. Friends, old and new, would come and go, but no one seemed to truly understand her. She often found herself dining alone at her favorite restaurants, surrounded by couples laughing and whispering to each other, or sitting in her large home staring at the ornate walls that felt colder with each passing day. It was as if the wealth that had brought so much outward success had failed to fill the silence in her heart. Then, as if by fate, Nathan Turner appeared in her life. He was 25 years her junior, a handsome young man with a quick smile, dark eyes, and a charm that was both effortless and magnetic. They met at a charity event one evening. Nathan, a man of average means but exceptional ambition, had been introduced through mutual friends. He was polite, well-spoken, and seemed genuinely interested in Catherine's life, her interests, and her views. While Catherine was used to the attention of men, there was something different about Nathan. He wasn't trying to impress her with material gifts or empty compliments. He seemed genuinely intrigued by her experiences, her wisdom, and the world she had built for herself. As the weeks went by, Nathan made an effort to keep in touch. He invited her to dinner, sending handwritten notes and thoughtful gestures that went far beyond what most men her age would do. Catherine was flattered, perhaps even a little charmed, by his attentiveness. She had never met a man who seemed so interested in her mind as much as her looks. He didn't just compliment her beauty, but admired her intellect and the way she carried herself with such grace. Nathan spoke of his dreams and aspirations. He claimed to be an entrepreneur on the rise, eager to make a name for himself in the business world. He told Catherine about his plans to start a business, to create something that would change the world. His ambition struck a chord with her. She had always admired drive and determination, and Nathan seemed to possess both in abundance. He was different from the men she had encountered in her past. He wasn't just interested in her wealth or status, but rather in her as a person. He was persistent, but never pushy, allowing her to come to him when she was ready. He made her feel seen and heard in a way that no one else had. Soon, their conversations turned into long walks, late-night phone calls, and spontaneous trips to beautiful locations. Catherine couldn't remember the last time she had felt so alive, so full of energy and excitement. She thought of Nathan constantly, imagining a future with him by her side. Her friends and family were skeptical, of course. They whispered behind her back, questioned his intentions, but Catherine dismissed their concerns. After all, what harm could come from a man who seemed to have no ulterior motive other than to love her? It wasn't long before Nathan proposed. Their wedding was nothing short of a fairy tale, a grand affair filled with flowers, laughter, and the kind of elegance Catherine had always dreamed of. Nathan's presence in her life filled the void she had been unable to shake for years. In her eyes, he was the perfect man, and she was the perfect woman for him. For the first time in a long while, Catherine felt complete. Little did she know, the man she had come to trust and love would soon lead her down a path from which she could never return. In the months that followed their lavish wedding, Catherine and Nathan's life appeared perfect. They were inseparable, traveling together, attending exclusive events, and enjoying the luxuries that only wealth could afford. To the outside world, they were the epitome of a modern-day fairy tale, a beautiful older widow with a charming younger husband. Their every appearance was marked by smiles, affection, and the sense that they were a couple deeply in love. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, subtle changes began to emerge that no one, least of all Catherine, could see coming. At first the changes were small, barely noticeable, a shift in Nathan's tone, a certain impatience that crept into his voice when discussing certain subjects. He was always full of ideas, of grand plans, but slowly, those ideas began to veer in a more concerning direction. Nathan had always been ambitious, but as their relationship deepened, his ambitions seemed to grow beyond his grasp, and Catherine became the one who could help him achieve them. He began to talk more frequently about starting new businesses, creating new ventures, and expanding his reach into markets Catherine had never considered. His suggestions were always laced with praise, telling her how brilliant she was, how much potential her wealth could unlock if they just took risks together. Catherine, feeling more in love than ever and wanting to support Nathan's dreams, agreed to many of his ideas. She believed in him, trusted him implicitly. After all, he had always been there for her, attentive, doting, and full of encouragement. When Nathan mentioned the possibility of investing in risky real estate deals or taking larger financial risks, Catherine saw them as opportunities for both of them to build something greater than just their relationship. He painted a picture of a future in which they were not just partners in love, but also partners in business. And so, Catherine, confident in her own intelligence but more trusting of Nathan's persuasive charm, began to hand over more and more control over her finances. Nathan never hesitated to ask for more. He suggested restructuring some of her investments, advising her to liquidate portions of her holdings to fund new ventures he was involved in. In return, he promised substantial returns, the kind of returns that could multiply her wealth in ways she'd never imagined. He made it sound so simple, so easy. His smooth words and the warmth of his touch reassured her every time she hesitated, convincing her that this was the right course. What's more, he painted it all as an act of teamwork, a partnership built on mutual trust and shared vision. But with each passing decision, Catherine unknowingly handed over more control, until the money that had once been her fortress of independence started to slip through her fingers. At first, everything appeared to be going well. Nathan was right. Some of the investments did show promising returns, and Catherine felt a renewed sense of purpose, as though they were indeed building something together. But as time went on, her gut began to churn with unease. Catherine started to notice that Nathan was becoming increasingly secretive about certain aspects of their investments. He was no longer as forthcoming with details, and his responses to her questions seemed curt, dismissive, or even defensive. Whenever Catherine tried to ask for more clarity on the deals they were involved in, Nathan would quickly assure her that everything was on track, that she had nothing to worry about, and that they simply needed to be patient. Soon, Catherine started to sense a growing distance between them. The same man who had once been endlessly attentive now seemed distracted, his mind often elsewhere. His occasional disappearances for business meetings became more frequent, and when he was home, his attention was divided, as if his mind was preoccupied with something else. The affection she had grown accustomed to began to feel hollow, as though it were more out of obligation than genuine connection. The woman who had once felt so cherished now found herself longing for the same warmth that had once been so abundant. Yet no matter how many times she felt the disquiet rise within her, Catherine ignored it, blinded by the trust she had placed in Nathan. Her love for him was a protective shield that kept her from confronting the unsettling feelings gnawing at her. She still believed in the man she had married, the man who had promised her a future full of excitement, success, and shared dreams. After all, he was her partner in every sense of the word, and she was determined not to let anything get in the way of the life they were building together. But slowly, the foundation of their marriage began to erode, though Catherine, caught in the web of her own blind trust, couldn't see it yet. The man who once seemed so trustworthy, so caring, was steadily revealing a side of himself that would soon change everything. As the months wore on, the cracks in Nathan and Catherine's relationship became harder to ignore. What had once seemed like a fairy tale now felt more like a tightrope walk, with each step becoming more uncertain. Nathan's actions, though subtle, were slowly eroding the trust Catherine had in him. But she was still reluctant to acknowledge the reality of what was happening. It started with small inconsistencies. The explanations Nathan gave for his frequent absences became increasingly vague, and his once open nature grew more guarded. He no longer shared every detail of his day with Catherine, nor did he seek her input on matters that once required her involvement. Despite her growing unease, Catherine dismissed the changes. She had been taught to trust people, especially those closest to her. Nathan had always been attentive and affectionate, so surely whatever was happening was just a passing phase. But soon, it became impossible for her to ignore the mounting signs. Her once thriving social life, filled with friends and acquaintances, began to fade into the background. Catherine noticed that many of the people she had once been close to started keeping their distance, exchanging polite smiles but saying little more. Her own family, particularly her sister, expressed concerns over Nathan's growing influence over her. Yet Catherine remained adamant. She loved Nathan. He was her husband, the man who had brought joy and excitement back into her life. It was when Catherine began reviewing her finances that the first real alarm bells went off. Nathan had urged her to invest in a number of high-risk real estate ventures, projects that promised huge returns but were full of potential pitfalls. Catherine trusted his business acumen, as she had been led to believe that Nathan was a smart and ambitious entrepreneur. However, when Catherine took a closer look at the documents for these investments, she began to see discrepancies. There were large sums of money being funneled into accounts she didn't recognize, investments that had yielded little to no return, and strange clauses in the contracts that didn't sit right with her. When she asked Nathan about it, he brushed off her concerns with the same smooth words he had used so many times before. "Trust me, Catherine. This is all part of the plan. I've got it under control." But Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. It wasn't just the financials. She began noticing a shift in Nathan's demeanor too. His charm had started to fade, replaced by an edge of frustration that seemed to surface whenever she questioned his judgment. It was as if he were becoming irritated by her need for answers, as though her inquiries were an inconvenience rather than a normal part of their relationship. The easygoing, loving Nathan she had married was slipping away, and in his place was someone she didn't fully recognize. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, Catherine decided to take matters into her own hands. She contacted her longtime financial advisor, someone she had trusted for years, to get a second opinion on her investments. What followed was a devastating revelation. The deals Nathan had insisted on had been risky, yes, but they were also largely fraudulent. Some of the projects didn't even exist, and the ones that did were mismanaged to the point of failure. Catherine's advisor had been cautious from the start, but her trust in Nathan had blinded her to the warning signs. She had blindly followed his lead, and now her wealth was disappearing faster than she could have ever imagined. It was a crushing blow. Catherine felt betrayed, humiliated, and devastated. She had been so willing to believe in Nathan, so eager to help him succeed, that she had ignored the warning signs. Now the full extent of his manipulation was starting to sink in. But even in the face of these revelations, she couldn't bring herself to confront him. She was still in love with him. The thought of confronting Nathan felt impossible, especially with the life they had built together, the life she had wanted so badly to share with him. Instead, she tried to make sense of what had happened in private, searching for answers she wasn't sure she wanted to find. The more she looked, the more she realized that Nathan had been systematically draining her resources, not just financially, but emotionally as well. He had used her trust, her love, and her wealth to create a false reality, one in which he was in control, and Catherine was unknowingly playing her part. But even as the truth began to sink in, Catherine remained trapped. She had trusted him completely, and the idea of losing everything, including the man she had loved, was more than she could bear. Instead of confronting the man she had married, she stayed silent, caught between the realization that everything she had believed in was a lie and the hope that things might somehow return to the way they had been. Catherine's world began to unravel at a pace she couldn't have predicted. The quiet realization that Nathan had been lying to her about their investments became a weight she could no longer carry. Her once unwavering trust in him began to shift, though the love she felt for him still clouded her judgment. Despite the shocking discoveries about his financial schemes, Catherine couldn't bring herself to confront him. She wasn't sure what would come next if she did. Would he deny it? Would he try to justify his actions? And most terrifying of all, could she bear to face the possibility that everything she had believed in, everything she had worked for, had been systematically dismantled by the very person she had married? For weeks, Catherine wrestled with her emotions, trying to navigate the maze of confusion that had replaced her once happy marriage. Nathan seemed unaware of her growing suspicions, or if he did notice, he expertly deflected them. He continued to shower her with affection, small gifts, and moments of tenderness that made her question if she was simply being paranoid. In a way, it felt like a game, one where he controlled the rules, and Catherine, caught in the web of his manipulations, had no idea how to win. Then came the suggestion that would forever alter the course of her life. One evening, Nathan, ever the smooth talker, suggested that they take a vacation. "You've been working so hard, Catherine. You deserve a break. Let's get away from all this, just the two of us, a fresh start, away from all the stress," he proposed. His words, sweet and persuasive, were hard to resist. Catherine longed for a reprieve from the growing tension in her life, a moment to escape the reality she had been desperately trying to ignore. She agreed, and they arranged to fly to a secluded villa on the Mediterranean coast. The idea of retreating to an idyllic paradise, where they could relax and reconnect, seemed to promise a new beginning, a chance for Catherine to regain some peace of mind. But when they arrived at the villa, the atmosphere felt wrong almost immediately. The pristine, sun-drenched house was beautiful, but there was something off about it. Catherine, still hopeful that this trip could help them find a way forward, tried to shake off the unease. But Nathan's behavior was different. He was distant, preoccupied with his phone, and often disappeared for hours at a time. What was meant to be a romantic getaway turned into a weekend of isolation for Catherine. She spent her days alone, walking along the beach, trying to push aside the nagging feeling that something was terribly wrong. Nathan seemed to have lost all interest in her, both emotionally and physically, leaving her feeling more isolated than ever before. On the second night of their stay, things took a darker turn. Catherine, unable to sleep, wandered around the villa, feeling as though she were caught in a fog. The moonlight outside cast eerie shadows across the empty rooms. It was then that she noticed something unsettling, a small vial of liquid on Nathan's desk, tucked behind a stack of papers. She recognized it immediately. It was a substance she had once read about in a true crime article, a rare and deadly poison that had been used in several high-profile cases of foul play. Her stomach twisted in knots as she stared at the vial, her mind racing. What was Nathan doing with something so dangerous? Why had he hidden it away? That night, Catherine lay awake, her heart pounding. The villa, once a symbol of escape, now felt like a prison. As the hours passed, she could hear Nathan moving around in his room, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. She tried to convince herself that she was overthinking it, that she was simply paranoid. But the more she thought about it, the more the pieces of the puzzle seemed to fall into place. Nathan's coldness, his sudden detachment, his refusal to communicate, it all pointed to something far more sinister than she had allowed herself to consider. The man she had married, the man she had loved so deeply, might not be the man she thought he was. The next morning, Catherine woke to find Nathan standing by the window, his back to her. He seemed unusually calm, even distant, as if nothing had happened. He greeted her with a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. He suggested they take a walk by the cliffs to enjoy the view and clear their minds. But Catherine's mind was anything but clear. She felt as though the walls were closing in around her, and no matter how hard she tried to push away the truth, it was becoming impossible to ignore. Nathan was hiding something, and she had no idea how much danger she was truly in. She could no longer deny it. Her husband had been lying to her for months. The lies were not just about money or investments. They went deeper, into the very core of who Nathan was. And soon, the full extent of his betrayal would reveal itself in the most shocking and deadly way. Catherine's last attempt at peace, at closure, had led her straight into a nightmare. The man she had trusted with everything was now the one who might take everything from her, her wealth, her trust, and ultimately her life. Catherine's heart raced as the weight of her suspicions settled upon her like an iron chain. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, each revelation darker than the last. Nathan's sudden distance, his evasiveness, his growing impatience. It all pointed to something more than just a failing marriage or a man overwhelmed by ambition. The vial, hidden in his office, only confirmed what Catherine had been unwilling to admit until that moment. Nathan was hiding something far more sinister than bad investments. She didn't know exactly what it was yet, but she knew with every fiber of her being that he was not the man she had married. The man she had trusted had become a stranger. That morning, as they walked along the cliffs overlooking the Mediterranean, Catherine's mind was a whirlwind. The view, breathtaking as it was, did nothing to calm the storm inside her. Nathan chatted casually, as if nothing were amiss, his voice a soft hum against the crashing waves below. He was the same Nathan, the same charming, affectionate man who had courted her so relentlessly, but everything about him now felt like a performance. Her every instinct screamed that something was horribly wrong, but she couldn't bring herself to confront him. Not yet. Instead, she decided to gather more evidence. She needed to know what he was really up to, why he had been so secretive, and what he intended to do with the deadly substance she had found. But Nathan's watchful eye made it nearly impossible for her to act without raising suspicion. Every time she tried to slip away to make a call or investigate his belongings, he was there, smiling and reassuring, as though he knew exactly what she was thinking. But deep down, she understood that he was playing a game, and in this game, the stakes were her life. That evening, when the villa was quiet, and Nathan had disappeared once more into his private space, Catherine finally made her move. She waited until the house was still, and then, as quietly as she could, she made her way to his desk. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the vial she had seen earlier. The small glass container seemed innocuous enough, but Catherine knew better now. She had spent enough time researching the poison in her mind, enough time to know that it could kill in mere hours, with symptoms that mimicked a common illness. If she had taken even a small dose, she could have been dead without anyone suspecting a thing. She wasn't sure how long Nathan had been planning it, but it was clear now. He had been preparing to end her life, not for any sudden financial gain, but for something far darker, more methodical. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. The life she had built with Nathan, the life she had trusted him with, had all been a lie, a carefully crafted web designed to ensnare her. Nathan had no intention of sharing his fortune or his dreams with her. He had only wanted access to her wealth, to her life, and now, with her vulnerabilities exposed, he was prepared to dispose of her to claim it all for himself. Desperation began to take hold of Catherine as she stared at the vial in her hands. She had no allies, no way to escape without alerting Nathan. His control over her had been so complete that even now, as she faced the horrifying truth, she couldn't shake the sense that he was always one step ahead of her. She had to get out of the villa, and she had to do it quickly, but every exit seemed guarded, every move watched. As the evening wore on, she realized that Nathan wasn't just playing games. He had become her captor, and she was running out of time. Catherine's fear turned to resolve as she put the vial back in its place and quietly slipped out of the room. She would not let him win. If she had to leave everything behind, she would. She couldn't stay another minute in the house that had become her prison. Her only hope now was to escape before Nathan made his final move. As she hurried to pack her things, her mind raced through every possible plan of action. She had no choice but to leave, to get away from Nathan and everything he had ensnared her in. She made a mental note to call her lawyer, to alert the authorities, to do whatever it took to expose Nathan's treachery. But as she reached for her phone, the door creaked open. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Nathan stood in the doorway, his face as calm as ever. He smiled, but there was a darkness in his eyes, a glint of something Catherine hadn't noticed before, something that sent a chill down her spine. "You don't have to leave, Catherine," he said softly. "We've come so far. Let's not ruin it now." But Catherine knew now. The truth had shattered her illusions, and nothing he could say would make her believe in him again. Nathan wasn't the man she had married. He was a predator, and she, unknowingly, had been his prey. The game was no longer about wealth or love. It was about survival. She had to escape, and she had to do it before he made her the next victim in his cold, calculating plan.